Welcome back, or if you're new here, welcome. On this channel, I talk about toxic people, particularly toxic parents in general, and how to heal from that, helping you further understand impacts of being around people and toxicity and dysfunction, and how you can break free from that. And today, I'm talking about reactive abuse. Now, this is quite a big subject, and I want to take a bit of a deep dive into it today because I think it's quite misunderstood. And I think at the corner of all emotional abuse and toxicity is reactive abuse. And I think it's one of the things that makes it really hard for many people, particularly those of you that have been in long-term relationships or grown up with parents that display a high level of toxicity and emotional abuse. Then you will start to recognize that underpinning all of that is reactive abuse. Now, if I had to describe to you exactly what reactive abuse means, reactive abuse is when people push you, normally passively, to your limit so that you then finally break emotionally. You have a outward external reaction to that abuse, and then they're able to point and make you the crazy one. So there's a level of gaslighting in this as well. And of course, it's easy to get a little bit bogged down in all the different terms and trying to make sure that we're calling things the right thing. But I think what's really important when you've been through any level of emotional abuse is to be able to start to articulate in your own way your experiences. So when we talk about reactive abuse in this way, let's start at that point that I made about it being passive. The key thing about reactive abuse is that your abuser or the toxic person in your life will be somebody that has consistently and constantly pushed you. I talk about death by a thousand cuts with a lot of emotional abuse because I think that we think of emotional abuse normally in a certain way. So we think of it of being at that kind of top level, very obvious talking down of you. So I don't know, making comments about your appearance, making comments about your character, maybe using like high levels of slander, horrible, disgusting words about yourself. And of course, that is still emotional abuse. But a lot of emotional abuse is more manipulative. It goes on below the surface and underneath the carpet, so to speak. And it's done in such a way where if you try to describe what you're experiencing, it becomes very difficult to do that. And so a lot of it is to do with the energy in which the person, in this case, the toxic person, shows up with, right? So the way that they make you feel, it may be like a subtle glance, a subtle change in tone, a subtle move of the mouth that's enough to let you know that what I might be vocalizing may sound like there's no harm in it to everybody around us, but you know that I'm getting under your skin and that I'm trying to be difficult and horrible to you. And I think when you start to understand that, you can start to validate your experience a little bit better and know that actually you don't need to be able to vocalize exactly what the abuse is, but you'll be able to feel it in your body. Now, if you've grown up with this, by the way, and you've grown up with it since you were very, very young, you will have learned to disconnect from your body and not trust your body. That makes reactive abuse then very easy because you don't trust your body when your body's giving you signals, or you're not even connected to your body. You're so disassociated from yourself that these outbursts happen and you don't even feel connected to them. And toxic and abusive people will play on that. They'll feed on that. They'll be constantly pushing your buttons. They'll be constantly manipulating you, and then hoping to bring you to a head so you have what feels like a very abnormal reaction around everybody else. And then they can point and say, there you go, I told you, look, they're crazy. And it can be very, very distressing. And reactive abuse can go on throughout the smear campaign. So even if you break free from these relationships, you may even find yourself over explaining and sort of almost trauma dumping to people to try to get them to understand your experience. And again, it can make it seem like you're the kind of crazy one, or you're the one that's overreacting. And again, this is all part of the emotional abuse. And so the key insight here and the key thing to understand is when somebody pushes you, particularly passively, when they push you to a point, to your breaking point, and they do it with manipulative tactics like slight subtle facial expressions. And it's worth highlighting this while I'm here, actually. It's worth highlighting that if you are somebody that's suffered at the hands of somebody that is abusive, then there's likely that you have a high level of sensitivity, right? So you're kind of over tuned in with people. You feel people's emotions very, very deeply. It's important to understand that a lot of abusive people, narcissistic people, if we're going to call them that, toxic people, they have a high level of sensitivity too. So they can get themselves in tune with you. And where you get yourself in tune with other people and then just abandon yourself and trying to make sure that they're okay all of the time. A toxic and horrible person will get very in tune with you and then use that not to abandon themselves, but to further their connection with themselves, to further the opportunity to make themselves the center of the universe, and then to manipulate. They'll manipulate your energy and they'll get in and they'll do reactive abuse in this way. So there'll be that subtle change in energy that nobody can pick up on. The tone in your voice, it could feel like they're saying the nicest of things. And then when you jump, when you when you flip, then they can point and say, look, like you're crazy, like, calm down and all that kind of stuff. You see this, I see this play out a lot on some of my social media things. People will passively talk to you in a certain way. And then when you react, they'll be like, whoa, whoa, no, I meant no harm here, you know? And they think that because they said, I don't know, fucking namaste at the end of their message or hugs or something like that, that it somehow means it's all love here. I never meant any harm by what I was saying. And you think, "No, listen, we know what's going on here, right? So, and what you're trying to do is create reactive abuse. So just to summarize, what are the best ways to start to break free from the impacts of reactive abuse? I'm going to start here like I always do, is to first validate and understand, actually, it's not that easy. Abuse is abuse. And so we must make sure that we don't blame ourselves for falling victim to abuse too much. But what changes can we make to make ourselves less vulnerable to abuse? A lot of it is about reconnecting with your body. Any kind of somatic work, for me, breath work's been great at getting back into my body and starting to trust myself again. And starting to be able to, I say, become a little bit more judgmental. When I'm around somebody and they make me feel a certain way, start to be able to vocalize that. So we can, some of the things I start to say to myself is, I, I didn't like the way that I felt in my body around that person. Now, like I always say, that might be a you thing. Who cares, right? Life's too short to be sticking around with people that make our bodies not feel good. So you can start to vocalize, and if you feel like you want to vocalize it to the person, but if you're talking about a toxic person or an abuser, you're never going to get them to understand or to self-reflect, right? So don't get lost in that. But if you're talking to somebody else about your experience, you can say, there was a subtle change in energy. I felt it in my body. I knew exactly what they were doing, and start to feel a bit stronger in that. So somatic work brings us into our bodies to begin to be able to trust that again, to begin to be able to listen to the signals in my body, know how I feel, and then react accordingly to them, free from everybody else. Start to practice putting yourself first again. Start to practice starting at that place of, how does my body feel in this moment? Breathing in, what do I feel in my body right now? Okay, this doesn't feel comfortable. I feel quite activated. Then I can get curious about why that is. The more that I trust my body, the more that I'm able to then buy myself a sense of freedom from that manipulation. Highly sensitive, toxic and horrible people will do, right? They'll come in. If you're more aware of it, if you start to call them out, you'll find less toxic people will stick around you, because toxic people, you're not a magnet to toxic people. And we've said this in a lot of content. Toxic, horrible people throw out the net and then they see who takes the bait. The less you start to take the bait, the less toxic people will be around you, because they're just going to go and find somebody else who's going to be a better and easier supply. But again, just to finish by saying, it's important to remember to not victim blame yourself here. All right. If you're the victim of abuse, then you're the victim of abuse. I hope this has been useful. I'm enjoying this longer form content now. Just allowing myself to ramble a little bit and unpack. I never overplan these. I never will overplan these. But doing this longer form content hopefully gives you a little bit more to take away. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done yet. And I will see you on the next one.